There are so many different types of compressors out there. How do you know which compressor plugin to choose for your particular mix? Well, keep watching because in this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to know about all the different types of compressors that are out there and when you want to use them and in what situation in your song. Hi, I'm Reagan Ram with OrpheusAudioAcademy.com, helping you make better music and grow your fan base online. In this video, we're talking all about all the different types of compressors that are out there. But first off, what is a compressor? Well, a compressor is a tool that is designed to control the dynamic range of an audio signal. So it turns down sounds that are too loud and turns up sounds that are too quiet. So think of it kind of like an automatic volume knob for your songs. And this is so key. Compression is so key for creating a professional quality mix because a big part of it is what you're hearing that pro sound. What you're hearing is a very compressed sound where there aren't any sounds that are too loud and jumping out and stabbing your ears. At the same time, you're not losing anything. The quiet sounds, you can, even though they might be quiet or softer in certain parts, right? Dynamics is still important for a good song, but nothing is too quiet that you can't hear it, or you can still hear all those soft parts. And that goes a long way towards getting that professional sounds. That's why compression is so important. But there's so many different types of compressors out there because there's different types of compression, right? So there's kind of different ways of thinking about it, different spectrums, different quadrants, I should say, of compression. So let's just say we have a vertical axis here. So at the very top, you're doing aggressive compression that is controlling hard transients. So a transient is that often loud initial part at the very beginning of a waveform. So the very beginning of your sound. It's the very first part, as they're called, the transients. And so do you want to control those? That's kind of, I guess, the top of the axis. Or do you want to control more of the tail end of the waveform? And so that's kind of the bottom part of the axis. That's one thing to consider, like where on the axis do you want to be with your compression? Do you want to be compressing just the very beginning of your sound and leave the rest untouched? Or do you want to be more so controlling the rest of the sound, adding more of a glued sound? That's what you have on the Y vertical axis. And let's say you have a horizontal axis, right, left and right. You have a very transparent sound, so you're compressing without adding any extra harmonics or what's called like coloring the sound, adding different textures to the sound. So that's like transparent. Or you can be using compression to also add some warmth or color or those extra harmonics like we talked about. So you're actually changing the sound and not just the dynamic. So that's kind of the compression graph, I guess, in other words, on what you want your approach to be with your compression. So with that in mind, let's dive into our first type of compressor, and that is the optical compressor. So optical compressors work by turning the audio signal into light, which it then uses to control the compression. So that's pretty cool. And because of the physical properties of what's called a photocell, the optical compression has a very musical sounding action. And as a result, the response of the optical compression is very smooth and transparent. So the optical compressor, that is falling into the transparent side of the spectrum on the horizontal axis. However, optical compressors generally aren't great at controlling those hard transients. So if we're going on that vertical axis, then they're generally down at this, so they're kind of in the bottom left corner then, we'll say, for this graph as far as optical compressors go. So they're great for transparent compression, also adding some warmth and sheen depending on, the type. If you're using like the famous LA2A, there's a bunch of different examples of this. So they can add some warmth as well, or also be transparent. And optical compressors are also especially good for vocals. So if you're using vocals, then you're probably going to want to use an optical compressor. Now, if you're using Logic, you already have a free vintage optical compressor built right in. This is based on the Teletronics LA2A compressor, which is probably one of the most famous, well-known compressors out there. So you already have that built into Logic. But if you don't have Logic, or you want another free plugin you can get that is an optical compressor, you can use the free ADHD leveling tool, which is also a clone of the LA2A. And there's a bunch of other companies out there that model this too. So if you're looking for a Pro LA2A optical compressor plugin, then you can check out the Waves CLA2A. So next, let's move on to your VCA compression. So VCA is an acronym for Voltage Controlled Amplifier, which is the component at the heart of the circuitry in this type of compressor, which obviously isn't that important for us if we're just using plugins, but it's good to know that these plugins are based off of actual analog gear and what that VCA then does to your sound. In general, you can think of VCA compressors as being basically jack of all trades, as they can do everything well. So they're great for compressing transient heavy audio like drums, adding punch, smoothing out peaks transparently, bus compression, and basically anything else. The only thing they're not as good for is adding some of that warmth or color, as they're typically more transparent sounding. Again, if you're using Logic, Logic has the free vintage VCA compressor built right in, or you can check out the FXpansion DC-AM free compressor plugin that is also modeled after VCA compressors. Or if you're wanting a pro plugin, one I really like is by IK Multimedia. It is the Bus Compressor, and this is really awesome. It's modeled after the famous SSL console bus compressors. So next you have FET compression or FET compression, and FET is an acronym that stands for Field Effect Transistor, which means it uses force fields. Open fire. Just kidding. Field effect transistor is designed to emulate the behavior of tube circuitry. All you really have to know is that FET compression is one of the most vital types of compression in music. It's known for having a fast and aggressive type of sound. So FET compressors are great for that if you want that aggressive sound that adds excitement. It's also great for limiting due to its fast attack time, and it's also great then for parallel compression if you're wanting to really squash a certain sound so you can blend it in with an uncompressed sound. Using a FET compressor is a really great idea for that. But it's not great for transparent compression, right? So if you're being fast and aggressive, obviously it's not going to be transparent. Now the 1176 is probably the most well-known FET compressor, so tons of companies emulate this. So if you want a free one, you can grab the Analog Obsession Fetish compressor, which is an emulation of that, or another one I like is the Waves version, the Waves CLA76. Or if you're using Logic, they actually have this built right in as well. Another reason why Logic is pretty awesome. Moving on, we now arrive at tube compression. And tube compressors are also known as variable mu or vari-mu compressors, as they produce smooth and warm compression. Tube compressors are great for their pleasant coloration of a sound, but they are not super fast acting, so don't use them for transient control. And the way they work is tube compressors create compression with vacuum tubes, and they're generally large, bulky, and expensive, but not if you're using plugins. So if you're going to use a tube compressor, they're great for, again, adding warmth, color, and fatness to a sound. Parallel compression, they're also great for that. And they're also awesome for adding glue on a bus or even master limiting. But they're not going to be great for controlling those hard transients. One of the most legendary tube compressor is the Fairchild 670 tube limiter. And if you don't want to go out and buy that, then you can use different software emulations. Logic does not have one of these, but a really awesome free one is the MJUC Junior by Klinghelm. This is a really awesome plugin that I use a lot. It's really great. In fact, I included it in my video on my 7 favorite effects plugins for creating synthwave music. It's that awesome of a plugin. Or a pro one would be the Waves Pugchild 670. Which is again an emulation of the Fairchild. Moving on, we've now arrived at digital compressor plugins. So digital compressor plugins, they're not emulating anything. They're just designed to be very versatile and precise. All the compressors we covered up to this point in time were analog emulators. So they're emulating actual physical analog gear that was used throughout the decades in the recording industry to get a certain sound. So we're used to hearing our music go through this equipment, so that's why we've kind of gotten used to that sound. We like the sound that they create, so that's why a lot of software now emulates them. But there's also a place for digital compressors that aren't emulating any of that analog gear. This is because analog gear actually has a lot of imperfections. You're limited often on the types of controls that you have, And they also introduce noise and grit to your sound. So if you're not wanting that, then that's a problem unless you're using a digital compressor. So digital compressors are awesome if you're wanting a hyper transparent compression that doesn't change or color your original sound that you're compressing. So that makes them very versatile. They often have extra features that are just not possible with analog gear, and they're often comprehensive and precise in their control. So again, Waves has a free digital compressor type built in, but if you're wanting another free option, you can pick up the Kotelnikov. You can pick up the Kotelnikov. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know. Or if you're wanting a professional one, a great one by Waves is the Waves EMOD5. Now this Waves plugin is really cool because not only does it have a very precise compressor built in, right? You can control, set the attack, release threshold, and so on, all those settings however you want. But you've also got a really nice gate built in, and you've also got a de-esser limiter and more all built into this one plugin. So that goes back to how these digital plugins generally give you a lot more features and control. Now moves us on to our final type of compressor, which is the multi-band compressor. And this is designed for to be very flexible and very surgical. So what multi-band compressors do is they allow you to compress specific frequency ranges of a source rather than just compressing the entire source the same. So for example, you can compress the high end different than you compress the bass frequencies in your track, or you can compress the mid-range differently than you compress the high end. So this is great because sometimes you have a very specific frequency that is popping up every now and again, and you don't want to just EQ that frequency out because that affects your entire track for the whole song. And if it's just periodic, right, then you can use a compressor for that, so that only when that sound goes past the threshold, then the compressor kicks in and squashes down that sound. So multi-band compressors, these are really awesome. They're really great for targeting specific frequency bands, great for mastering, great for smoothing, and they also reduce problem frequency areas very well. So a great free version of a multi-band compressor is the TDR Nova. And by the way, links to all of these free and professional plugins will be linked in the description below. And a great pro version of this is the Waves C6 multi-band compressor. All right, so now you know everything you need to know about all the different types of compressors that are out there. But obviously, compression is just one piece of the puzzle to creating a professional quality mix. And if you're wanting to finish more commercial quality tracks faster, then I highly recommend you grab my rapid song finishing checklist in the description below. This will walk you through an entire proven mixing process so you can get more songs done faster. All right, if you found this video helpful, feel free to drop a like. And if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any new tutorials I release on this channel, then be sure to hit subscribe and click the notification bell. Otherwise, have an awesome day, and I'll see you in a future video. Bye.